Detroit Experience Factory, we're a nonprofit, and our mission is to connect locals and visitors alike to the people, places, and projects that make Detroit a great place to live and work. Um, so we do that in three ways. We run a physical welcome center at 123 Monroe. We opened up the first welcome center in the history of the city of Detroit back in 2009. Also, we put together maps of the city, and then the program that I run is our tour program. We do tours of all kinds, walking tours, bus tours, scavenger hunts, strolling suppers, even bar tours. In the past 10 years, we've taken 70,000 people on tours. Last year alone, we took 17,000 people on tours.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And my personal experience in Detroit, I actually grew up out in the suburbs. I grew up out in Livonia, but my family's always been from Detroit. My grandfather was a city bus driver for 40 years, so I've been coming to the city, like I said, my entire life. And I've had a fantastic experience living and working in Detroit. People looked at me like I was a bit crazy when I first moved to Detroit 7 years ago, but it was a great place then, and it's only gotten better since. I've had nothing but great experiences living here. Obviously, it's a major city, and you need to use your head going on, but there's places in every city where you shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm still surprised about is how many people think that Detroit, isn't making the comeback it really is. They're still skeptical. They worry about it being unsafe. It's just they haven't quite gotten to the point where they believe the quote unquote hype, but it's not just hype, it's really true. And
Right.
What we love about what we do with PureReinvention is we get to take people there, talk to the innovators that are doing amazing things to recreate that space in Detroit. We have awesome podcasts with people like the chief marketing officer from Shinola, Jeanette Pierce at Detroit Experience Factory.
I know her a little bit.
Yeah, you probably spend a couple hours a week with her, right?
Yeah.
Under the Radars with us, so that's Jim Edelman, I think, and Tom Dalton is the host there. They are based out of Detroit, but they go all around Michigan, and they have a lot of experiences. Those people have all been on our podcast and really telling the stories of Detroit, and it's so cool what we hear and learn every time that we talk to somebody. Jody, welcome. Thanks for
taking Mike's spot. Filling the fourth square.
We can hop in and out as the conversation goes, and you guys, if anybody that's viewing would like to join the conversation or come into video, one of us three will up in the corner there. Jody or I are happy to pop out as we continue the conversation. Jody, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with We Invent, because we took a bus trip over to Detroit in the fall?
Yeah, that was my, so actually, let me back up a little bit. We had met with Jeanette Pierce for the first time this summer, and that was at Misty's insistence. She had either, I don't know if you met Jeanette or if you'd known about Jeanette.
I just knew about the tours and the stuff that they did, and it sounded cool.
It was really cool. Like, we got to go to her place and hear the story. And John, you had talked a little bit about that, and she just has such an enthusiasm and such this magnetic, personality. Like, you can't even keep up with all the facts that are rumbling around in her head. And she took us on just a walking tour, really. And that was the first time that I had seen Detroit from that side. So I'd been down to like Tiger Stadium. I had been to what's the Red Wings bar that's kind of across the street. I'd walked by the Fox Theater, and I was like, so that's Detroit. Done. And so to go on that walking tour with Jeanette, even though we didn't really break that far outside of Campus Martius, was really eye-opening and very cool. And so after that meeting, Sonia Robinson, who's in our group and who's connected with us today on the side, and myself, we just looked at each other like, this is it. This is totally what we're doing. We had this women's initiative that we knew we wanted to bring together. We were looking for an inaugural kickoff event. We wanted something that was unconventional, something that would get people excited, something that would get people talking. And we were like, we got to come to Detroit. We totally have to do it. And so we loaded them on a bus, went to Detroit, picked up Jeanette. We shut up. Jeanette started talking, and I feel like, 6 hours went by. We went all over the place. And she just has this connection with so many really interesting people that have stories that aren't necessarily making it on the news, or they're not the big sound bites, but these are the real people that are making it happen. And Jeanette sort of has this all access like backstage pass, and because we knew her, we could kind of ride on her coattails. We're with her, and it was really an amazing experience. And there's an enthusiasm, there's an energy in the city, and that's what we wanted for our group, and that's really, I think, what made that experience feel the way it did. I mean, we had awesome women, we had awesome conversation, but it was really Detroit that sparked it. So we've decided it has to be the event every fall. Like every new cohort we're kicking off, it's like Jeanette and a bus in Detroit. Done.
Well, what's so cool about what Jeanette and Detroit Experience Factor is able to connect us to, and Jon, maybe you can speak about this a little more. They don't just connect you with like the super big names. They can do that. They can give you access into the very high level, which is awesome. But they took us to Good Cakes and Bakes. Is that the store name? And we talked to April.
Absolutely.
Who started her business in 6 weeks with a soup grant. And just hearing her story was so inspiring. And so to be able to see the whole spectrum of people that care about the city, that have, been on the roller coaster ride of the economic downturn and stuck through it and figured out how to be successful. It's just so cool.
Yeah. I think people like April Anderson and just some people don't realize or don't take the time or don't have access to see the people behind some of the local businesses that we have in Detroit. Because it's a lot different than, say, like you're in Brooklyn and you go to some hipster coffee shop that some millionaire decided they wanted to build, and then so 6 months later, they had a coffee shop. The people that start businesses here in Detroit, whether it's April Anderson, a lot of time they're literally pouring their blood, sweat, and tears and putting all of their energy into this, and so it just becomes a product of them and a testament to their work ethic. And so behind every local business, there's a great, amazing story generally of someone who defied odds, who went against naysayers, and really just decided to make their life and the city of Detroit a better place through their efforts. So they're what we like to call Detroit doers, and you can be a giant Detroit doer or you can be a small Detroit doer. Dan Gilbert, of course, he's a billionaire and he owns 80 buildings downtown, but he's getting them fixed up and getting them populated to people as small as two of my friends did a bike ride with 6 of their buddies every Monday 6 years ago with 6 people. And now you guys are probably aware of Slow Roll. They get 7,000 people. They get 7,000 people on a good Monday.
That's awesome.
So Detroit, it's an amazing place. It's a very collaborative city. It's probably the most collaborative city that I know of. People will be working that are seemingly competitors, but they'll work together. They'll if one bar is out of lemons or something, they can go down the street and get them from another bar because they look out for each other. Because I think people really see that the rising tide. I mean, it's a cliche, but the rising tide raising all ships type mentality.
Mm-hmm. Jon, do you? We had Marlo on from the Butterfly Effect Detroit in the most recent podcast on Monday, and he made I
just saw Marlo today.
He made this comment, and it was actually his friend. He said that made this statement about Detroit and the reinvention, and everybody focuses on the startups, but what about the Ben-ups? And what about the people that were here during the downturn and kept the business open and kept it going when nobody was looking at Detroit? And so does the Detroit Experience Factory, take the backstage pass that we were just talking about to those places too, and not just the big names like the Dan Gilberts who invested money in, recently, but folks that have been there forever.
Exactly. No, yeah. So we'll take you to Quicken Loans, but at the same time, we'll also take you to Eric's I've Been Framed out in Livernois, who's been framing pictures. And again, listen, like you say, like, oh, why would you take someone to a frame shop? That's not that big of a deal. But for this guy to stick out, I mean, 30 years of economic downturn and still standing strong and still not, and he's not like Home Depot or something like that. He's one guy that's just been running a frame shop and also sells different memorabilia surrounding like African American heritage. So it's just an amazing story to see stores like that still surviving after all these years, along side by side with April from Good Cakes and Bakes and these other businesses that are starting.
Now, John, one of the other things that was interesting that Jeanette was talking about is the Detroit Experience Factory wasn't just designed to give tours to people who were outside of Detroit and wanted to know more about Detroit, but it was really designed to give tours to local Detroiters to learn more about their city. And I'm interested to see what you think about, you know, the renaissance happening in Detroit is still confined, right? I mean, there are certain corridors that are really feeling it and the momentum and the enthusiasm because they can see the change. But how do you connect that momentum to other parts of Detroit that are hearing about it, but they haven't seen any change where they're at? So what are you guys doing, or what do you have available, or what are some thoughts around taking that momentum and pushing it out to all, you know, all boundaries of Detroit?
Absolutely. So what we're doing specifically is trying to shine the lights on different areas that are doing well, that are not Midtown, that are not downtown. So that's every single one of our tours we get outside, unless it's a walking tour, because people are lazy.
We need those bikes you were talking about.
Exactly. Well, we're doing bike tours this summer.
Yeah. Oh, good.
That's cool.
Yes. So we take people to places like West Village, and we'll take them into cool new businesses that have opened up in that area, like Sister Pie, or people that have been working hard for a while now, like Detroit Vegan Soul, which is fantastic, which is soul food made completely vegan. And I can almost guarantee I'm the least vegan person on this feed right now.
I don't know. You might have some.
And I absolutely love I absolutely love their food. And then a major focus we've been having is on the northwest side of Detroit. So like the Avenue of Fashion at like 6 Mile and Livernois, 7 Mile and Livernois. That's where April's Good Cakes and Bakes are. That's
okay, so we went there.
A little south of there is where the Eric's I've Been Framed is, the guy that's been there for decades. But that's also where the old Redford neighborhood is, where you go to Sweet Potato Sensations, which is a fantastic restaurant that's been there for decades, or Scotty Simpson's Fish and Chips over in Brightmoor, and see that. And see these things are happening, and it's very similar to why Jeanette started Inside Detroit, our predecessor organization 10 years ago, is that there are fantastic things happening in these neighborhoods, but people just don't know about them. People don't know that Artesian Farms is doing vertical farming in Brightmoor, which is one of the hardest hit neighborhoods in Detroit. People don't even think to look in a place like that for someone doing something so innovative. And so that's we're kind of, as we're celebrating 10 years of tours, I think we're kind of running back into why we or at least Jeanette got this started in the beginning, is we want to show people that there are these great things happening that people aren't even aware of. Because 10 years ago, the reason Jeanette started this was because she felt that there was fantastic things that Detroit had to offer, and just other people weren't aware of them. So she wanted to show people, and I think it's the same way to extending this resurgence, or whatever you want to call it, to the neighborhoods, is to show people that there's all of these things and these people that are working very hard. And just as if they could get opportunity to show what they're doing on a larger scale, they would thrive just the way other people are in Midtown and downtown.
Under the radar, did you see over on the side, John? We're under the radar. So it's John's naming off all of our upcoming segments that we're about to go. Great minds, huh?
I only have one small bone to pick with Under the Radar. They mispronounced my friend Kyle Bartel as part of Sit Down at Detroit. So I forget what they called his last name, but as soon as I saw that on PBS, I texted Kyle, and he's like, "Yeah, I know."
Jim, do you Under the Radar? Do you want to get on here and have a little conversation about that, or maybe talk about your segments coming up?
Yeah, that'd be great.
First he mispronounced Kyle's name. Now he misspells my name on the side here.
Oh gosh. He has to redeem himself. I'm gonna jump off so Jim can jump on.
I'm just teasing.
We'll see if he can jump on here, because it would be cool to kind of get their perspective too on some of the segments they've done with Detroit.
Well, Ann Arbor is east of Detroit if you're willing to go east enough.
Yeah.
Well, John, while we're waiting, can you just kind of describe the tour schedule and what?
Absolutely.
That would be most helpful.
So we are we're going to be rolling out our summer tour schedule in April, but I guess I can let you guys in on a few of the things that we're doing. But also, just so you guys know, about 85% of our tours are private. So we set them up for private groups like Jody's that came in, but we also do them for large corporations like Quicken Loans and PricewaterhouseCoopers. We do them for small book groups and the Red Hat organization and things like that. So we do them from all across the board and cater them to anybody's needs. But our public tour schedule right now, we have Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays. We have free public walking tours. The first and third Saturday of every month, we do a public bus tour.
Where does the public bus tour go?
The public bus tour starts at our Welcome Center at 123 Monroe, and you see the highlights of downtown, like Campus Martius. You go in the Guardian Building, you go out to the Riverwalk, then you drive along the river for a bit, and you see like the new Outdoor Adventure Center, part of the state park system, and the Quicker Cut, and Rivertown, and then out to West Village and Indian Village, and then across Kirchville to the Heidelberg Project. And so on this area, you do see the good parts of Detroit, but you also definitely get a taste of some of the more distressed areas, because we never try and sugarcoat Detroit or pretend that Detroit doesn't have any issues. What we also don't do is just say, hey, here's some abandoned buildings, you should check these out. We try and put some of the systemic issues that caused some of these problems that Detroit has suffered and the issues that Detroit has seen, and put them into context so people understand that it's not just an abandoned building because some guy didn't pay his foreclosure. It might be an abandoned building or didn't pay his mortgage, I should say. But it might be an abandoned building because that guy lost his jobs because of some of the jobs were moved out to the suburbs and things like that. And without a mass transit system for him to get to them, he wasn't then able to make it to work and things like that. So we try and put all these issues into context. So then we see the Heidelberg Project, we see Eastern Markets, we go through Midtown and then head back downtown. So that's about as much as we can jam pack into 2 hours. We'd love to go further, but people get scared. If you talk more than 2 hour tours, people get scared. I don't know why.
Commitment is scary, that's why.
Yeah.
What type of screening process do you have, Jon, in terms of getting a stop on a tour? Do you guys pre-screen it, or what's the process behind that?
Oh well, I mean that's one of the great things about our tours and our tour guides is that we all live here in the city of Detroit. So I don't take you places that I've never been before. I'm taking you places that I've been so many times. The owner knows my drink before I walk in, or things like that. So we take places. I never say we sell Detroit, even though we do attraction stuff. I show people what I love about Detroit, and then Detroit does the rest. I mean, these are places that we've all been a million times, and it's not just we Google where to take people in Detroit and then take them there. We know these out of firsthand experience so I go there by myself before I have 30 people behind me.
Talk about the other folks working at the Detroit Experience Factory. How are they? What's their background? Do you have? Does everybody give tours? Do you have like areas you specialize in? How do you decide that?
So we've got. Let's see. There's Jeanette, of course, who you guys all know. It seems like she's our executive director, our fearless leader. I'm the director of experiences, so I run the tour program. There's Matt Chung, who I think is in the audience here somewhere. He's our director of brand strategy, so he makes everything look and sound good. Because if it was up to Jeanette and I, everything would be Times New Roman on white. So he's fantastic. He does our social media and things like that. And we've got a communication specialist that works on his team, DeAndre, who's a lifelong Detroiter, along with Jeanette.
When we were there too. Okay.
You may have, yeah. And then Kaylin Waterman, she's the newest addition to our team. She works with me on the tour side. She's our tour coordinator, another lifelong Detroiter. And then our amazing community liaison is Sue Kraus. We do a lot of, we have booths and things we call like a mobile welcome center at different events. So she coordinates that and also functions as kind of our office manager. So she makes sure that everything is neat and organized, because I'm not going to show my secrets, but you're sitting in a very messy room right now that I live in. So
it's like that commercial where the mom's away.
I just strategically placed my laptop so you get Superman and the tiger's hat and not the mound of laundry that's 2 inches to the left. And then we have about 10 to 15 tour guides that work anywhere from 2 hours a month to 40 hours a month, I would say. All with different backgrounds. We've got lifelong Detroiters. We have some transplants. We have people that are 21. We have people that are 45. So I mean, and up. So you'll still get the same meat of the tour. You'll still get the same facts, but you'll get a different experience every time with every different tour guide, because you'll be seeing Detroit through a different tour guide's eyes.
And who develops the fact piece? I mean, I know Jeanette loves that, and so I'm assuming that she's developed a lot of the initial material. Is she still the one that develops that information on the new places, or does everybody have a hand in that?
Everybody kind of has a hand in that. We actually have a secret Facebook group for DXF tour guides, where if something new comes up or something interesting about the past comes up, we'll post in there for people to integrate into their tours or not.
I want to jump in there. That is such a cool idea, and I keep hearing about that more and more. The way people are using these private Facebook groups, and I'm part of one for like a group of social media people that work for the state. But I love that it's such a quick and easy way to connect, especially because you're pretty much always there anyway. And as a millennial, and I'm sure you can understand this too, John, and Jody wants to be more busy.
I passed that Instagram fail.
But that it blends so much, and that people are able to just kind of juggle the personal and the professional. Do you ever experience problems with that, John? I know we're getting off the Detroit theme for a second, but I just thought that would be an interesting question.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, I'm lucky enough where I have a job that is not like it's like the opposite of like an uptight corporate culture. So my coworkers know the trouble that I get into, and it's not something that I'm not that I'm doing anything crazy, but I mean, it's not like an uptight like suits all day type environment anyway. So they already know everything I'm doing anyway. So I think I might not be the best person to ask about that, because I think people run into problems when they have more uptight workplaces, I guess, and then they have to kind of manage their online presence to accordingly. But yeah, I mean, I'm friends with all my coworkers. We hang out. Also, with us having 5 of us working in a relatively small office and pretty intimate settings, you get to know each other, and everybody knows each other's personal lives and things like that.
Sorry, I'm distracted because Matt Chung is following me on Twitter, but I don't think he's here. So I'm like, come on, Matt, get with the program. He'll be here soon. Mike, Mr. Reinvention wants to know if we've discussed Detroit as a learning lab. We started to. We can get back to that. That's a good kickoff point for us. Will, you've been awfully quiet, so I feel like you should weigh in.
Yeah, John, can you describe from somebody who's outside of Detroit, and we've been going in and getting experiences and really seeing at a grassroots level people taking ownership? I mean, you've got this wonderful phenomenon where, people are just taking the bull by the horns and making things happen. And could you like kind of translate that or relate that experience that people outside of Detroit can experience with you guys?
Absolutely. So it kind of goes back to what I call what I said before with the Detroit doers. People that are not. I mean, there's plenty of things in Detroit, as with any place or a lot of things in life, where you can say, "Man, Detroit doesn't have this," or "Somebody really needs to do that." Or, "Wouldn't it be great if Detroit had this?" But that's the easy thing to do. The hard thing to do is to say Detroit needs X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to be the one to do it. And you see that across the board in Detroit quite a bit, from things as what seems simple now is like the store Pure Detroit. Are you guys familiar with them? They sell Detroit made goods and Detroit souvenirs. They're in the Guardian building, the Fisher building. Sean, she opened that in 1998. In 1998, you say you're going to open up a store that sells Detroit made goods and Detroit souvenirs, and people laugh at you. I mean, that sounds like the craziest
Who's going to Detroit
idea
to
ever.
buy those, right? That's what you're thinking.
Exactly. And that was everything. Who's going to Detroit? Who cares if things are made in Detroit? But she felt that's what Detroit needed, and she now has 4 locations, 3 in the most iconic Detroit buildings, and a 4th one that operates on Belle Isle. But then you've also got on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people like Detroit Labs, which is an app firm, and everybody thinks apps in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, but they started in the Madison building downtown with their 4 or 5 founders, I believe, and now they have about 80 workers, and they have their own building making apps. And some of their first clients were General Motors and Domino's and DTE Energy. I mean, so, and I think what is interesting from what I've seen, because we've done some of like the Detroit as a learning lab type tours for large organizations like Bosch International and Nike even, is I think with these kind of bootstrapping entrepreneur types, I think you see a lot of I don't know if I don't know, like not jealousy, but a lot of interest in these larger companies to, I guess, wanting to be as quick and as nimble as some of these smaller firms. I think when you're working for a multi-billion-dollar company, there becomes a lot of these bureaucracies, and you just get pent up a lot of barriers to real innovation. And so I think that's what a lot of these companies take away when they walk into, for instance, like you saw in Under the Radar, which is Sit On at Detroit, when you just see 2 guys that saw a problem in Detroit that people needed a place to sit on when they wait for the bus. And so they just started making benches, and they just went ahead and started doing it. And so I think that's a very refreshing and to a certain extent novel concept to people that have spent their careers working in these multi-billion, very regimented work environments.
John, hold that thought. I loved what you said about the new companies being nimble and really flexible, and there's almost this jealousy. And I think that's a fair word, because these bigger businesses get so in the trenches with what they do and what they've always done and how they run their business that they're stuck. And these new businesses come in and they just don't have the trappings of "we've always done it that way," which is kind of our least favorite phrase ever. But we'll get back, but I don't want to lose Sonia's question here. She asks you how you divide your time between research and work. And I think we can round that actually back to staying nimble if you do it right.
Well, I'm extremely blessed in that. I mean, a lot of people say this, but I truly love what I do. So the idea, I mean, of course I have days where I wake up and I don't necessarily feel like going in, but I really genuinely love what I do. I love Detroit. I love seeing new things in Detroit. So for me, research is checking out new restaurants or reading books about my favorite city, which is Detroit.
Sounds so terrible. Eating and reading books, like everything. You got all my favorite things.
I know. So for me, it's not a matter of balance. It's just having enough energy to ever do everything I would, because not all of us have the Energizer battery in our back like Jeanette does.
Well, this touches on something that Mike is following us now on Twitter because he has no audio or video. So this is how he's kind of chiming in. But he brought the interesting theme, and we did hear this in Marlo's interview as well, and Under the Radar, which was the role of storytelling, and how, you mentioned these big companies come in and they're connected to the flexibility and the shortened timeline between idea and implementation or launch. But I would assume they also connect to the story. I know when we met with Jeanette, it was cool to see the buildings. It was cool to meet the people. But what I remember is the story. And every city has a story. But I think that Detroit's doing a really good job of telling theirs.
Yeah. At least on our end, so I guess with the storytelling aspect, it kind of comes back to the tours, and it kind of goes down to like the type of criteria we look for when we're looking for a new tour guide, because it really is not about how much people know coming in. It's really more about an attitude and a personality, because I can teach you facts. I can tell you that Detroit Detroit was founded in 1701. I can tell you that the Guardian Building was built in 7 months. I can tell you, teach you all these things. You can learn these, but you can't teach someone who's not that great at public speaking to be good at that. That's a much harder skill to learn. And so it's really that's more of a thing that we look for than someone having prior knowledge. Because again, you could be an absolute expert in whatever field, but that does not make you a good tour guide, and it does not make you a good storyteller.
Yeah, people don't connect to a fact necessarily. Although the one about the Guardian building in 7 months is really damn impressive. Yeah. I mean, I still remember that, but the story behind it and the fact that a lot of the beautiful architecture on the inside was covered up because they thought it was ugly during one of the ugliest, I think, periods.
Hey, one of our we invent participants willing to talk, because speaking of Detroit stories, I think Rebel Nell really stuck with us, and it would be awesome
Rebel Nell's fantastic,
to hear somebody who talked to them for the first time share their really raw experience of the impact it left.
So we've got Rosalie, right, and we have Amy Frankman, and I think those are two.
I think Jody Parker's still hanging out.
Oh, I didn't know she was on.
I think so.
Yeah, let's have one of you guys jump in.
Rosalie's listening in. Amy or Jody Parker?
Yeah. It's not that scary, guys. You just push the button, pop on.
Go on, Jody Parker.
If you hate it, you can pop on. Come on. We got Julie Novak on the last time. She wasn't planning on being a part of it either, but
we totally are horrible liars because we promised we wouldn't force anybody into the spotlight. And now we're bullying them.
Hey, here comes Rosalie.
Hi.
Hey. Good job.
Hi, Rosalie.
I love learning all this new social networking, which is something I'm trying to do at my new position. And one of the things that struck me about what Jon was saying is he gets to do research on something he absolutely loves to do. And, I know that one of my responsibilities with my new company or my new position is to do a lot of research, because you have to have something to put up on social media that's going to be relevant and that people are going to read and draw people in. So it's really hard if you're not necessarily passionate about the subject.
Yeah.
So
talk about in terms of passion, right? I mean, so Misty sort of launched this with Rebel Nell as one of the great stories of our Detroit trip. And Rosalie, you were with us when we went to see Rebel Nell's studio and to talk to the women that were working there, and they had a plan. This was a step for them towards a bigger goal. And would you mind kind of sharing your thoughts on that particular experience?
Oh, I thought it was amazing. I mean, it's something that I've never really been exposed to. Pulling something out of nothing, really. I mean, taking paint off of a building and turning it into something that they were able to do was just amazing. And I liked hearing some of it, but man, I was checking out the jewelry.
Yeah.
I think we all were. For those of you who might not have been familiar with Rebel Nell, they take graffiti, so street art that kind of falls off the paint, the walls or wherever it's painted on, and they make it jewelry. I bought earrings. I know a lot of people bought jewelry while they were there.
Yeah.
But the women that are making the jewelry are women who need a help up. They need a hand up, and they're maybe in domestic violence situations, or they're facing homelessness or something like that. A lot of them have young children, and it's a space where they can bring their kids when they don't have daycare, and they can work on their schedules if something else comes up. And meanwhile, they're going to classes for home ownership, financial management, whatever they need to get them on their feet. So Rebel Nell's success isn't in keeping employees for years and years and years. It's actually seeing them move through almost as quickly as possible, because that's the success is being able to lift them up.
Right.
So isn't that really counterintuitive? I mean, a lot of organizations today, they want to get employees and they want to just keep them and hold on to them with this death grip, almost to the point where I've actually had clients hesitate on whether or not to invest in an employee, because then they'll have a skill set that will make them more desirable and more marketable, and therefore they're going to leave. And I think it's interesting to see an organization that was built with exactly the opposite mindset. That the goal is not to keep you here. The goal is to give you a skill and give you every opportunity to move on to whatever is next for you.
Yeah.
And it would be really cool to think about that mentality, even in a scaled down version, in today's workforce, because that's what a lot of employees are wanting. They're wanting opportunities and growth and diversity and experience and challenge. And I think companies haven't quite understood that yet. And so they haven't put together staffing paradigms that allow us to bring them in, train them, grow them, and then replace them when they're ready to move on to the next thing. And that's I think that's kind of the next shift when it comes to culture. And you can do it in a small organization, but how do you do it in a Nike? How do you do it in a Bosch? Where you invest a lot of time and institutional knowledge in these folks, and then they're off to the next thing.
Well, that's really the point of Pure Reinvention and Detroit, and that's why Detroit's doing it so well. Is they aren't saying you have to stay here and love us forever. It's like, how can Detroit be a bigger part of society, of the world, or whatever? But they're really doing a good job at trying to leverage the attention, the media, the conversation that's happening around the city, and do awesome things. Shinola is obviously a fantastic and very public example of that. But there are many others, John. I'm sure you can list probably 20 others right off the top of your head.
I keep bumping my desk.
Tanya asked a question that I wanted to answer, and asked about my experience at Rebel Nell and how it transferred to my personal or professional growth space. And I thought about how the women that are working there are actually, they're probably experiencing some fear at first going into that environment before they find out how safe it is and how they're going to go through changes, but that it's good. And I remember being a single mom 30 years ago, and how fearful I was, but at the same time brave, because it was a time where I had no choice. I had to do what I had to do to take care of my son and find work and train and get the skills that I needed to continue on. And it's funny how 30 years later, I'm much more fearful now of change than I was when I was 20.
Really?
Yeah.
Because you have more time to be afraid? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, I've been doing the same thing, and I've been pretty much in the same place, in the same position for that many years, and I'm older, and it's just kind of, so it's a little bit more fearful, I think, than I was when I was young and naive, and I was going to take over the world and, do whatever I had to do. So, but I did have those thoughts when I was listening to some of those ladies there.
Yeah, it kind of sparks it again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, because some of these, and it was women that we were interested in speaking to, because that was really who was a part of our event. But they decided to branch out at all different ages, out of all different circumstances. But I've been doing a lot of sort of reflection lately, I guess, and doing a lot of listening to people that I think are really inspirational, and they talk about this desire, like in your heart, you kind of know what you want to do. What's a good fit, even if it's not a good fit forever. You kind of know that you're ready for something new, something that's, whatever's next. And the more time you can devote to that, the more likely that's going to become a reality for you. Yeah. Versus just, wouldn't it be nice someday? And yet I still devote 100% of my efforts over to what I've always known. And then we wonder why it doesn't get any easier for us to make a change. And so it was really neat to kind of hear these stories of women who had other things on the side, right? Because we can't always leave one thing to start another. We have to have a bridge or a transition. But even just devoting some time, even if it's not a lot of time, to what it is that you really want to do, and it's amazing how that can start to build some momentum. And once you start doing it, and Jodie Parker had talked about this in her podcast. It's only scary until you start.
Right.
Because once you start, then you're just on a roll, right? It's what you said with your son. I just knew I had to make it work, so I did.
Well,
You just have to dip your
I think
toe.
with Rebel now, I think what they're doing is it's all based on trust. I mean, they're fantastic to their employees, but it really doesn't take much. If the employee lose that faith, that trust, they don't hesitate to end their relationship with them. But I mean, especially on the women's side, I think just the way I'm the only boy in my family, and I just think the way our working world treats our women, especially around motherhood, is just criminal. I mean, the reason why a lot of these women ended up in the positions they are is because they were single mothers, and their child got sick, and if you have to choose between making it to your job, making $8 an hour on time, or taking your son to get help for his flu or whatever, you're going to choose your son 10 times out of 10, and you should. That's the right thing to do. But then you end up getting fired for these jobs. Whereas at Rebel now, when they're in a place where people truly understand what it is to be a mother or be a woman, and they say, okay, you got to leave, go take your son to work. Okay, you can come back in here, even if they're coming in by themselves, and make up the work at a different time. But that's where the trust issue comes in, to making sure that they are coming in after hours or on the weekends or things to make up their hours. And I just think that is something that companies like Nike and Bosch can take away, is to especially to give women flexibility to make their work fit into their life and their role as mothers and parents, and not the other way around.
It's interesting because part of this goes back to one of our core fundamentals, which is disruption. When you're being disrupted, people have such a hard time reacting to it. And you're right, it does come down to trust, because you have to trust that whenever your boat gets rocked, whenever your world gets rocked with an unforeseen problem that you're not prepared for, you have to just roll with it and trust that you're gonna find something. You're gonna have help where you need it. It doesn't always happen like perfectly. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of gray in disruption and a lot of scary unknowns. But at the same time, that's the impressive part, I guess, about startups and other things that are happening in Detroit. That they're creating that flexibility into new business. I don't know.
And that's what's attractive about it.
Yeah, it's very attractive because it provides more support to mothers, or even, I think another big thing is older people coming back into the workforce, because maybe they were out because they were raising a family, maybe they were out because they didn't need to work, I don't know, for whatever reason, or because they got laid off and now need to literally reinvent themselves to be able to be back in the workforce.
Right.
And Detroit's kind of creating some cool space for people of all walks that way.
So Rose, tell us about your new position.
Oh, well, so at Michigan Press Association, we've always had a media placement department where we place advertising in any number of newspaper or any kind of media with one call from, our clients. For a while, it had been shipped out to another press association and they were taking care of everything for us, but they made a decision to bring it back into Michigan and start with some new partners and refresh our brand. So that's been that part of my job, where I'm running that for-profit service, has been kind of exciting and sort of entrepreneurial, because, I've had to have a new website built. I've had to have, logos done and social media. And, so all of that build up to it has been fun in the transition, and I'm excited for the future for it. But there's some things that are just, it's just the same old thing from before. And it's like, why? What made me think I wanted to do this, except there was really nobody else to do it. There wasn't going to be an investment really in finding the right person to do sales. And so I did the best with what was happening and negotiated a new position that worked out for me for now anyways. So.
Well, and I think that's...
Well, congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and I think a key word is for now, right? Because that's the whole, I think that's another big tenet of reinvention, is that you never ever get to the end. There's a disruption. And then you think about, okay, well, I'm going to do something about this. You've got the ownership, and then, okay, well, what am I going to do? Make it simple, right? Focus on what you want to do, and then understand that you're not in it alone. So get your resources and then do it. Like that's the cycle over and over and over again. And so that you're going through that right now.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be here forever.
Right. And it's also had me step out of my box, which, I just said I was in the box for so long. So I'm being forced to step out of the box. And even if I don't like it, or I don't like some of the things I have to do, it prepares me for whatever's next, like we've been talking about. So
I think disruption is really the hardest part of the process. I mean, you can, it's arguable, of course, you can always find other parts of it that are a big deal, but nobody likes to be kind of pushed out of what they're comfortable doing. And a lot of times disruption happens to you. We try to advocate and teach that you can make disruption happen in a very positive way and kind of keep your hands around it. But most often you just get smacked over the head with this change, and you have to figure out how to manage it.
Well, I think Detroit is it's the living example, right? Like, we had a system set up. It worked for us for a long time. And then we just kept doing things the same way, even though circumstances were changing and money was leaving and people were leaving, right? And we had all these signs and indicators that we needed to start operating differently, but we just put our head down, kept doing the same things, right? Until one day we were forced to make a change, because we looked up and we didn't like what we saw, right? And there was a lot of blame and a lot of finger pointing and, all of that. And then people just finally decided and said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do. And that's where a lot of the momentum came, and that's, I think, what's kind of the sexy, attractive part of what's going on in Detroit. But I mean, again, back to Marlo's comment, you had people that have ridden this storm out all the way through too. So that to me is another reason why Detroit's a perfect laboratory.
Hey, I don't know if you guys are seeing some of the questions come through, but Mr. is wondering if Detroit is as bad as he hears. I would like to know where you are from and where you're hearing that.
If Detroit what?
If Detroit is as bad as they hear it is, and are the Japanese buying up real estate? And then another, Boston. Okay, you're out of Boston. And Net Management wants to know, what is the Detroit experience? So there you go, Jon.
I would say that Detroit is not as bad as some people would make it out to be. That's not to say that Detroit does not have some very serious issues that need to be addressed, but I believe are being addressed at this time. But there's also a lot of fantastic aspects that would really knock your socks off if you came to Detroit. Let me give you a tour. And so, is he asking what DXF is? Detroit Experience Factory?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, man. Cleveland? You're going to listen to them? I'm just kidding. Detroit Experience Factory, we're a nonprofit, and we connect locals and visitors alike to the people, places, and projects that make Detroit an exceptional place. So we run a welcome center for Detroit. We put together maps and other materials, and then we do tours and experiences in Detroit, everything from walking tours to bus tours to scavenger hunts, strolling suppers, and bar tours. Mm-hmm. But I think for those of you that are from Raleigh and Boston, I think if you came to Detroit, you would be absolutely amazed by how much more of the story that there is. A lot of people will only show you one very specific aspect of Detroit, and usually they use that to fit a larger narrative that they're trying to paint. When in reality, Detroit is a very complex place that has a lot of, yes, negative issues, but a lot of very, very positive aspects to it that make it a unique place as well.
I think the compelling thing about Detroit right now is it takes time to change, and they're doing it publicly and trying to do it in a very open way that, what do I want to say? That inspires people, but more just provides a mentorship to other cities, because Detroit's not the only one that was facing or is facing hardship. and people, cities, organizations, and individuals can all learn from such a very public nosedive, and then the very public and painful climb back up. And sometimes there's great success stories, and sometimes it's 2 steps back, but the fact that it's there and that we can translate it into a learning opportunity is awesome. And if you guys who are from out of state haven't visited, I would absolutely recommend coming to the city. I mean, it's obviously better in summer, not when there's 10 feet of snow on the ground, but come back and contact Detroit Experience Factory, because they can show you the city. They'll take you on a tour, or they'll just hand you this amazing list of like places to go and bars and restaurants to check out. And that's just a hell of a way to see the city and make up your own mind. But it's certainly not as scary or horrible as I think the world at large hears.
Right.
I tell you, Mike and I have been down there over the last year about 6-8 times just interviewing for podcast, and the stories and the initiative and the excitement is just really palpable, and it's exciting to me, very exciting to me. And you know, it's a joy that you guys are partnering with PureReinvention, Jon, and I really appreciate the work you guys have been doing.
Thanks.
There are a couple questions, and Jon, I don't know if you would know the answer to this, but one of the questions has to do with the IT or the startup scene. I think specifically in the tech sector.
Sure. There's a growing IT section and startup scene in Detroit. The startup scene has been around for a minute, but the IT scene, especially with Quicken Loans, I mean, they're essentially they're a technology company. I mean, yes, they do mortgages, but all their mortgages are online and things of that nature. So they requires a lot of the huge IT things, IT aspects to their business that you'd expect a larger tech firm. Also, the same thing with the health insurance industry in Detroit, like Blue Cross Blue Shield and Meridian Health Plan. They both have pretty robust IT sections as well. The startup section is mostly app-based at this point. We've got about a 1 block area of downtown where you see the Madison building, and it's also on the same block as where Detroit Labs is. And then there's another place in the Broderick Tower called Grand Circus that are working on mostly apps. Still, a lot of the hardware stuff is down out in Silicon Valley, but we are seeing some of the apps starting to be made here in Detroit, and then also in Ann Arbor, which is west of Detroit, unless you work for Under the Radar.
Jim, are you still awake over there? Or you just dropped him?
And Jon, what about real estate? Do you have any idea?
So yeah, I did see the real estate for the block for under 100,000. That was honestly that there were places where you could do that not that long ago. I think those have all kind of gone by the wayside. That was more at the height of the recession. That was the case. Now prices have rebounded substantially. The Detroit market actually has outpaced the national market in terms of how much prices have gone up in the past 2 years. So, I mean, things are still less expensive. It's certainly coming from, I don't know too much about, I don't know if it was the gentleman from, or I guess I'm assuming that they're men, but that's incorrect. The person from Boston, prices are still way less than you'll find in Boston. You can buy I just saw a 5,000 square foot mansion in an Indian Village. This is high for Detroit, went on sale for just under $600,000. But if you take that same 5,000 square foot mansion and put it even in Metro Detroit, even put it in Birmingham, that's a $2 million house. If you put it into a city like Boston, that's probably a $10 million house.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of restoration happening, right? I mean, some of these mansions that you're talking about, they've been around for hundreds of years. They have these long histories, and then they were sort of abandoned or people own them, but nobody was doing anything with them. And developers have come together, or business folks have kind of pooled money together, and they're starting to rehab a lot of these. And that was really a cool part of the tour as well. Yeah.
So not so much in Indian Village. Those all kind of have always been in good shape, but places like Boston Edison, yeah, absolutely, that's the case. I mean, then that's when I mean, those houses even made homes in Indian Village look small. So that's where Barry Gordy's mansion was. That's where Henry Ford had one of his mansions before he moved most of his real estate out to Dearborn. And some of those, yeah, they were very, very derelict. I mean, I remember my father and I, not with any serious intention, but we're just interested and went and looked at a 12,000 square foot mansion 5 years ago, and they're asking $65,000. Gosh. I know. It probably needed a lot. I mean, it probably needed,
a lot of, yeah.
It probably needed $100,000 worth of work, but I mean, had we had done that, that house now could sell for $500,000.
Yeah. Well, Nicole Curtis has brought a lot of attention on the real estate side too, and we're huge fans of HGTV in our house, and of course we love Nicole Curtis, and so to see homes in Detroit, and then we took the kids and we drove by one of the homes that we just watched her rehab, and that was just, it's like in the middle of just not, it's like this flat open area right before you hit the city, and there's a couple houses right there. It's just right there. It feels like it's just in the middle of nowhere, and that's the other cool thing about Detroit is it can be buildings in metropolis, and then you take your head up and there's just open space. Yeah,
absolutely. That area, Brush Park, that's an area where, so you've seen it now with the Nicole Curtis house. That's an area, if you go back to Brush Park 3 years from now, you're not going to recognize it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
if you
that's
don't go
kind
because Bedrock, which is the property management arm of Quicken or Dan Gilbert or however you want to say that, they just put out their renderings for their huge apartment complex they're going to put there, and of course the Red Wing Stadium is going right across the street. So literally, I mean, 3 years might even be too long. 2 years from now, you might not recognize that whole area.
That is one of the things that's happening with the accelerated change. But did you just see the question pop up about, do you see car manufacturers returning? Go ahead.
Some of them, I mean, the car manufacturing, not a ton of it is in the city itself. You do have some of it in the city, but a lot of it is in suburban Detroit. The only of the big three, the only one that's actually headquartered in Detroit is General Motors at the Renaissance Building, Renaissance Center. Chrysler is out in about an hour north of Detroit, and Dearborn is the headquarters of Ford. I do think that there's a bit of a push to have more of these American cars actually be made in America, but I think more importantly, Detroit is doing its best to diversify its economy and not necessarily rely on the auto industry for every single thing, all of its all of its money making. So now that's why you see more investment into technology and things like that to, again, try and diversify our economic egg basket, I guess.
So Julie Novak has a question here. She says, how realistic is it to return neighborhood connections by changing the highway footprint in Detroit? Walkable and connected communities were lost over time. And I don't know
how
if the
realistic
M1,
is it?
I don't know if like the M1 rail touches on any of that, and I don't know where that runs from. But
I mean, the poster child for the highway footprint decimating a community is I-375. So I-375 is an offshoot of I-75, of course, that it now serves as the eastern border of downtown Detroit, and that was put in during the late 1950s, early 60s, and completely eradicated a neighborhood called Black Bottom, which specifically had an area in it called Paradise Valley. And Black Bottom was where like the more affluent African Americans lived. And Paradise Valley was, from what I've read, it's basically like a better version of what Harlem was at that same time frame. So it's where you saw like the jazz musicians coming from, and the playwrights and the poets. And so then you put in I-375, and it not only pushed all those people out, a lot of which ended up into the Brewster housing projects that were shadowing Brush Park when you were there, and have since been torn down. But also, it really cuts off neighborhoods. I mean, it's a psychological barrier to the extreme once you have to cross that freeway. I mean, even for where I live right now, a lot of the things that are really not that far, it's 5 or 6 blocks from me, but I have to walk over the freeway over like a pedestrian bridge, and it really makes it seem like that is much, much further away than it is. There is talk of raising I-375 back up to a surface level street and not a dugout freeway the way it is now. And I think there's a huge amount of support. So I do think you'll see I-375 raised back to a surface level street, but at the same time, you see that you also still see people talking about widening I-94 and widening I-75 in hopes to relieve traffic, even though it's been proven time and times again that adding lanes to freeways does not alleviate traffic, and they're going to lose some walkability in neighborhoods that are currently pretty good.
I know we have one more question that just came in, but we did only ask for Jon's time until 9:30. So, Jon, I'll leave it up to you if you want to maybe round back privately later to answer this question, or hang out for a couple more minutes and answer it.
I can hang out for just a couple more minutes.
All right. So
I'm going to go to bed. I'm fighting a cold, so I'm going to go to bed and just, let's say 5 more minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time. So can you speak to the crime rate or the household income around there?
Crime rates is still obviously, I mean, any crime is too much crime, but there's a lot of really great initiatives to stem some of the crime. Also, another issue with the crime rate was the response time of the police department. The current administration, Mayor Duggan, and then also the current police chief have fought really hard to get that response time down, and they've done a really good job. Also, another place another place that's been a haven for crimes has been gas stations, because I mean it makes sense. You're kind of at a vulnerable state. You're there. You've had your back turned to people when you're pumping gas. But they're doing something remarkable that's never been done before. They're trying to take what was a weakness in terms of crime and turn it into a strength. Mayor Duggan was talking about this last night in his State of the City, where these new gas stations called green light gas stations, and they have big green lights shining, so people know that they're safe. And along with the big green lights, they light from all areas of the property. The idea was that it needs to be so bright that you can read a newspaper there. And you obviously know the print on a newspaper. And so they're lit up incredibly bright. And they're incredibly sharp HD cameras that are interfaced directly back to the police station. And so there's someone monitoring those 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And with the new cameras, they're actually able to thank you for the prescription there, doctor. With the new cameras, they're actually able to identify wanted felons and wanted criminals, even by license plate. So that's really going to go a long way to stem some of the crime issues, especially, I mean, if you're able to pull, the criminals literally can't even go to these gas stations anymore, because if they do, they're going to be pulled over.
Yeah. Well, Jon, thank you for your time and the fact that you're sick. It's like
You're a real
struggling
trooper,
through.
Jon.
I know,
You're a real
it gets
trooper.
worse at night too. Like nights and mornings are the worst when you're sick. So thank you for hanging in there.
I started my work today at 7:30 with the Detroit Policy Conference. I've been going for 14 hours now.
Well, we appreciate having
but this was actually a ton of fun, and I'd love to come back sometime. So let me know anytime.
anytime.
We love you anytime.
Yeah.
MPA rules. I think whiskey and honey was one of the culprits, not one of the solutions.
Well, I do want to remind everybody, the next 3 weeks we've got our podcast focusing on Detroit. So please, subscribe to our podcast via PureReinvention.com.
Yep, follow us on Twitter, and we're on Facebook, both at Pure Reinvention. We'll have more of these blabs. Join us again for those of you who've just found us kind of stumbling through Blab, and stay connected, because we'd love to keep bringing Detroit stories to you.
Yep. And then as far as Pure Reinvention goes, we have a starter session that's coming up in May, and that will be placed in Detroit. And that's actually 2 day-and-a-half experiences separated by about 3 weeks, where there's some one-on-one coaching in between. And it's all about this idea of pure reinvention, and this, how you take disruption and how you channel it into whatever's next for you. And then there's an immersive component of that, where you actually then get to experience some of those stories in Detroit. So if that sounds like something that you have an interest in, check us out on PureReinvention.com. There's a lot of information there. Again, Will mentioned you can sign up for the podcast as well, where we're featuring Detroit over the next 3 weeks. And this has been great. So thank you, Jon. Thank you, Will. Thank you,
Thank
Misty.
you. And I'd love to, and under the radar, I'd love to be on your show anytime.
Oh, there you go.
John, is it weknowdetroit.com.org? Remind me.
We know Detroit.org.com will still get you there, but we are a nonprofit, so we're .org. Yeah, please come on, check out some of our tours, and hopefully when you guys come in May, you'll be coming down to see us as well.
You bet we will. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.